All right, just real quick here, bit of an insight. I was reading this book, and the situation in it reminded me of something that I've sort of experienced recently myself. Had some experience with it myself, and essentially, it's about our society, the way we live, a lot of things go unnoticed. A lot of, emotional dynamics. We're sort of in the dark ages of psychology, essentially. And there's just so much about human nature that we haven't really reckoned with because of the taboos and, the difficulties and discomforts with the subject. Looking at ourselves, is sort of like the most challenging territory for human beings. But essentially, what this situation highlighted for me was, about guilt. When we feel guilt, it's a natural, thing. We do something and we feel, guilty about it. And that, that is one thing. Just feeling it once, you feel it once, and then maybe you change your mind to, you do your behavior, you change your behavior. And, that heals, that wound heals quickly. You may feel a sudden, shock to your system, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, I don't want to, do that again. But, there's certain things, that we don't even notice that happen when we feel guilty over something. And for whatever reason, we feel, that we have to continue this behavior that makes us feel guilty. And, whether it's right or wrong, that doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're in a situation where you feel like some kind of wrongness is taking place, and you're essentially, what is guilt? It's like you're, working against your own values. And, often I think in this world we are, because we end up in these insular, situations where we can't really interface with those around us from a real level of, really talking about, what is going on, because, there's so many, threats put on us. So a lot of us live with guilt for years and years and years. And, we don't reckon with, what will happen with this guilt. It incubates something, terrible inside of us, that when we have like something like a panic attack, now suddenly all this guilt that you've been pushing down for all these years, now it like floods into your system, and you're like forced to look at it, and you're like, now you can't get away from it. Now it's like your entire body is fucking, writhing in agony, because you can't, like the wound, that would have been a small wound, like if the guilt, it was just like a passing guilt, but a guilt that is practiced for many, many years, invites something into our system that is like a practiced guilt. And now the habit of guilt is in our system. It's not just a guilt, not just a feeling of wrongness that, we did one act. It's like an entire habit, an entire system, an entire way of thinking, an entire, all the strategies that went into maintaining, this discomfort, this feeling of not being allowed to be yourself, or that you're forced to make decisions that go against your own values, essentially. And then that just creates this tremendous discomfort inside your system. And, the more, we don't reckon with it, the more, it is an unconscious pattern in our system. You know, the more painful it becomes when we finally, you know, come to a situation that like forces everything to the forefront of our mind. And now, like, you know, like now our system is just like overwhelmed, you know, with holy shit, you know, like, am I gonna ever heal, you know, from this suffering? Because my entire system has been trained along these lines. And, you know, it's like, what do I do? Where do I go from now? You know, how do I live? I just feel ashamed. I feel terrible all the time. And how do I even fix it? You know, because the pattern is so fucking deep and it just feels so overwhelming. And it's like, who do I talk to? You know, how do I reckon with my humanity? You know, like, how do I feel? You know, this is sort of like where, you know, guilt turns into shame. You know, shame is about, you know, fundamental, you know, feeling of badness about yourself. You know, guilt is like, oh, I did something wrong. Maybe I can correct it. Shame is like, I feel like a terrible fucking human being. So essentially, you know, that is, you know, what many of us practice. A lot of us, you know, like we can go through our entire lives, you know, practicing these things, and, you know, somehow, you know, maybe we can skirt around it. But I think often, you know, we end up and, you know, creating habits that just create incredible shame inside of our systems that we don't reckon with, because we're like, you know, doing our best to manage within the hostile environment, you know, where there's a lack of communication and a lack of, like, you know, really reckoning with the broader spectrum of human behavior. Because, you know, there's a certain, you know, we're all taught certain taboos as children, you know, but those taboos, you know, may have nothing to do with normal human behavior, you know, and they may inhibit us in ways that are very dangerous and destructive, you know. And anyhow, so yeah, it's you know, one guilty act is, you know, that's something that is easy to deal with when you've practiced it for years and years. It, you know, it creates like a demonic force that you're up against. And, you know, the problem is, you know, this demon shares its body with you, and you have to fucking face it. And it's like everything else seems small and in the distance, and you're like trapped inside this body where you have this gatekeeper of this tremendous fucking dark entity that you have to answer to. And it's like, you know, and it wants your soul, it wants your happiness. You know, what is your soul? Your soul is your natural flow of current, your natural way of being. And it just says, no, fuck you. You're a piece of shit. You can't have this. You have to go through me. You have to go through my system. You know, you and I, we've been in this together for so many years. You have to do everything I say. You have to follow my rules. And you're like, oh, fuck, you know. It's like, how do I continue? I can't fucking do it, you know, your way anymore. But, like, I don't know how to do it naturally. So
I want to make a comment. I like everything you said.
Okay.
I wonder if anyone listens to this.
Mm-hmm.
I see that every single human being suffers with that demon.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone. You're not talking about yourself
Mm-hmm.
as some sort of pathological person. You're now making a confession of some sort of crime, of having a being of argument inside yourself.
Right.
That people can be so goddamn literal.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, every single one of us have this challenge to face and deal with, and it's on us,
Mm-hmm.
not anyone else.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And that's where the rub is. We were never taught to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps to conquer a demon inside ourselves. That's not in our culture, except for willpower, fucking willpower, which it never works.
Right. Well, the demon is essentially the net effect of having to figure things out on your own, where you're expected to read between the lines of what, you know, society deems acceptable. And so you come in the darkness, you know, of your own personal counsel. You know, you come up with this, you know, these strategies to survive, but they're not really happy strategies. They're like, you know, they're begrudging, you know, like sulking in the darkness type of, you know, their strategies born of like resentment essentially. And so now, you know, they become part of you because you practice them so well, but you know, they're really working against your own life force. And at a certain point, you know, it can grow so big inside of you that it's like, who, you know, what part of me is really left? You know, all that's left is this fucking strategy, this fucking demon, you know, that I have to answer to get anything done in this world that, you know, makes me want to live. So,
well, I like how you as a person, as a spokesman for this, I can say, having known you for many years, one of the most independent thinking people I know that doesn't want to drink the Kool-Aid. You don't want to take what culture says is truth.
Right.
But you're wanting to forge it in yourself. And so I see that with that consistent determination, you've been able to find the falseness in yourself after tremendous, immense focus to that very ethic. You're responsible for your life. You're in charge of your life. And I don't see you yielding to say, I'll be happy being a victim. I'll be happy to delegate my misery to being caused by other assholes, and I'll just hate them and think that's going to work.
Right.
You don't do that.
No.
And they're talking to people, some of which are more like you and some are less like you. Well, the ones that are more like you are going to hear what you're saying. Will the ones that are less like you hear, you're saying, this is on each of us. We have choice. That's what you tell me 4 or 5 days out of the week. I have a choice.
Right.
I have a choice. And then by God, you wrestle with the monster demon and prevail time and time and time again with your choices. And so I think I wanted to say that I think that it's not a hopeless situation.
Right.
It's dire.
Yeah.
It's in you.
Right.
The monster's in you.
Yes.
And you don't want to lose confidence because you find out that you have monstrous ideas.
Yeah.
But we all have monstrous ideas. We've been propagandized to believe this shit and this shit and this shit. All of it being likely pretty shit that's going to serve some corporate interests, some network, some advertiser, some pedophile, some abuser. All the crap that's in us is on us to clean away.
Right.
No one else. And the reason I say it is you're the only person I've met in my entire life that marches with that flag in his hand. I think it's kind of obvious in your videos.
Yeah.
But I think people might want to get a little flag like that.
Right.
It's on me. Just a little flag, you know.
Right.
What they put it on their lapel. It's up to me.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming people anymore. Yeah, they're certainly blameworthy. They've done the work. But it's on me. And I've never seen anyone in my life that's quite so dedicated to that ethic as you. I'm not blowing smoke. I'm just saying this is an important factor when he's talking. I hope people hear that you're coming from that position of not trying to take people's hope away because there's a monster inside themselves. But say, hey, look, that monster is just a petty little thief when you look it in the eyes, and it'll disappear if you challenge it with choices that are consistently solid.
Yeah.
Because the monster is always irrationally and slippery, like a snake. So I'm guessing. I don't know. I'm talking out my ass now. So that was all.
Yeah. Yeah, it is slippery because, you know, habits that are so well practiced, you know, they often go under the radar. And, you know, we could like fix part of, you know, something and then, you know, and slip on some other aspect, you know, but it's all sort of essentially, you know, up to our own decision of, what is it that we want, and, what is it, and how, what are we willing to do to get it. So anyhow, I'll leave it here.